The day Melody asked me for a divorce, I didn't react the way she expected. And honestly, that was the beginning of everything changing. I was sitting at the far end of the couch, laptop balanced on one knee, halfway through replying to a client email when she walked in. She didn't sit. She didn't pace. She just stood by the window with her arms folded like she had been rehearsing what she was about to say all morning. "Dean," she started, her voice even, almost rehearsed. "I've been thinking, and I want a divorce." I looked up from my laptop, blinking slowly, not surprised, just quiet. It was like she dropped a stone in a lake, but there wasn't even a ripple inside me. Maybe there should have been. Maybe I should have cried, begged, or gotten angry, but all I felt was this stillness, like the part of me that used to fear this moment had already moved on months ago, quietly, without telling me. She waited for a reaction, maybe even a fight, but when I simply nodded and said, "Okay," her expression didn't change right away. Only her eyes blinked a little faster. She seemed thrown off, like she expected to be chased. You see, what Melody didn't know, what she couldn't know, is that I had been grieving this marriage long before she spoke those words. I had noticed the emotional gaps she thought she'd hidden, the distracted dinners, the way she stopped asking me how my day was, the way she flinched slightly when I reached for her hand during a movie. At first, I blamed myself. I thought maybe I'd stopped trying hard enough. Maybe I'd gotten boring. But I never stopped showing up. I never stopped doing the quiet things. The grocery runs, the car oil changes, the coffee on her nightstand every Saturday morning. And every time I did, she looked through me like I was just there. It's hard to say when exactly I stopped expecting her to care. But the moment she asked for the divorce, it was like my permission to let go had finally been signed. She started packing small things that same afternoon. Books, makeup, even a set of wine glasses that had always been hers. I didn't stop her. I didn't argue. I didn't ask where she was going or who she'd be with. That's the part she couldn't understand because, in her mind, I had been the dependent one. The quiet, safe, predictable husband who never pushed back. The man who would break when she left. But I didn't break. I breathed. And in that breath, I started thinking. I didn't know it yet, but in just a few days, she would regret everything. Not because I did anything cruel or dramatic, but because I finally became the version of myself I had buried for her. The man I was before all the compromises, before the slow erasure, before I kept making space for someone who had stopped coming home emotionally years ago. She wanted freedom, so I gave it to her. And that, right there, was the first move in a quiet checkmate. I didn't tell anyone right away. Not my brother, not my coworkers, not even my oldest friend, Reggie, who usually hears everything first. I wasn't embarrassed. That's the strange part. It wasn't shame that kept me quiet. It was peace. A kind of unexpected, almost uncomfortable peace that made me question how long I'd been pretending to be okay. I'd walk through the house and see the evidence of absence. The missing perfume bottles on the dresser, her absence on the shared calendar. No more faint hum of her podcast drifting down the hallway in the evenings. She used to listen to those true crime ones, the ones with the ominous piano music and overacted narration. I never understood how someone could fall asleep to stories like that. But then again, I'd stopped understanding her a long time ago. People always assume that when a relationship ends, it's because of one big thing. An affair, a betrayal, a screaming match in the kitchen that shatters plates and illusions all at once. But sometimes it's much quieter. It's forgetting how they like their coffee. It's not noticing when they start turning their phone away when they text. It's having entire dinners where no one asks a single question. The erosion isn't loud. It's slow. And by the time you realize you've been standing on sand, you're already waist-deep in the tide. I didn't cry. Not when she packed. Not when she handed me the signed documents, her signature all loops and pressure marks. Not even when I opened the drawer a few days later and found the anniversary card I bought last year but never gave her because the timing felt wrong. I just stared at it for a while, then closed the drawer again. What started to hurt, strangely enough, were the assumptions, not hers, mine. I had assumed that I wasn't enough. That maybe if I had made more jokes, planned more spontaneous trips, lost the 15 pounds I kept putting off, maybe she'd still look at me like I mattered. But now that she was gone and I was still breathing, still standing, still me, I realized I hadn't lost anything. I had just stopped pretending to be someone I wasn't. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of answers I never gave myself the time to hear. And then came the unexpected moment. 3 days after she left, I got a message from her. Not a long one, just a simple text. "Hey, can we talk?" Just that. No period, no emoji. Just 7 words that hit harder than the divorce papers. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what not to say. Something in her tone was different. Not confident, not triumphant. Something between curiosity and regret. Like she had walked into the next chapter and realized the pages were blank. I didn't answer right away. I went on a walk instead. No music, just me. The quiet of the neighborhood, and the odd comfort of cracked sidewalks under my sneakers. I think it was on that walk that I realized something had shifted. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I wasn't trying to win her back. I didn't feel the urge to rush in and fix it. For the first time in years, I was actually listening to myself. And the next time I saw her, well, let's just say I wasn't the same man she thought she left behind. The strange thing about being alone again, really alone, is how loud your life becomes. Every drawer creak, every faucet drip, every loose floorboard you never noticed. Suddenly, it all feels like it's speaking to you. The silence isn't empty. It's filled with things you've ignored for years. Thoughts you buried under busy schedules and "I love yous." That night after she texted me, "Hey, can we talk?" I didn't reply. I let the message sit there, glowing quietly on my screen like a candle in a room I didn't want to enter. It wasn't because I was angry. I wasn't. Not even hurt in the way people expect. I think what I felt was something softer but heavier, something like truth. Because for the first time I realized I didn't miss Melody. I missed the version of her I had in my mind. The woman I believed she was. The one I thought I was building a future with. The one who used to sit on the floor and fold laundry with me while we talked about nothing. Who laughed at the dumbest parts of movies and once cried over a baby duck we saw stuck in a drain on vacation. But that version of her, she hadn't existed in a long time. When someone leaves, they don't just take their stuff. They take your memories and rearrange them. And that's what was happening now. I wasn't just losing her. I was re-seeing her. And I didn't like everything I was starting to notice. The forced laughs, the quiet eye rolls when I shared something personal. The way she'd stay out just a little longer every Thursday evening, claiming book club, though her copy of the book never moved from the same dusty spot on the nightstand. I used to brush it off. People grow, people change. But there's a difference between evolving and disappearing. And somewhere along the line, she disappeared. I got home late that evening from a long walk and checked my phone again. Another message had arrived, just under the first. "I didn't expect you to be so okay with this." And that was it. No punctuation again, just the barest admission. It wasn't a question. It was something closer to a confession. And I knew then what she had expected. That I'd fall apart. That I'd grovel. That I'd try to bargain, to remind her of the good times. She wanted me to validate her guilt by needing her. But I didn't. Not anymore. I never said it out loud while we were married. But I always felt like I had to earn her love twice for every time she gave it once. Like she was doing me a favor by staying. I used to chalk it up to her being guarded. Maybe she didn't grow up with a lot of affection. Maybe she didn't know how to receive love. I excused it all quietly, steadily, while shrinking parts of myself to make room for her uncertainty. Looking back, I can't believe how many things I kept inside, like how she used to sigh when I brought home flowers. "Lilies again?" she once said, not even looking at the card I had written. Or how she once told her friend on the phone, not realizing I was in the next room, "Dean's dependable, not exciting, but maybe that's what I need." I was a habit, not a heartbeat. So no, I didn't answer her text. Not that night. I sat in the living room and let the house breathe without her. I cleaned out the kitchen drawer where we kept loose batteries and coupons we never used. I took down the crooked photo frame in the hallway, the one she always said she'd fix but never did. I even lit one of the candles she hated. Too woodsy, she once said. Smells like hiking. That candle burned for hours as I sat in silence and just existed. No performances, no pretending, no trying to win her back. I think I needed that silence more than I ever knew. The next morning, just before sunrise, my phone buzzed again. Third message, shorter than the first two. I think I made a mistake. There it was. But the thing is, she didn't realize I had already stopped waiting for her to realize that. It happened on a Thursday. I still don't know if she planned it or if she just wanted to catch me off guard. I hadn't answered her last message, the one where she said she thought she made a mistake. I read it maybe a dozen times, even dreamed about it once, but I never typed a reply. Instead, I went about my life like a man learning how to use his own name again. I ate alone without setting an extra fork on the table. I talked to myself out loud in the evenings, not out of loneliness, but because I'd gotten used to silence being something I had to fill. Now I was learning to let it be. Then I saw her again. It wasn't at a restaurant or a dramatic doorstep scene. It was the grocery store. I was picking up cereal and frozen blueberries, things she never liked. She always had something to say about what I bought. Too much sugar. Too processed. Do you even look at the ingredients? Now I could shop in peace. I could breathe again in aisle 6. But when I looked up, there she was across the produce section, standing near the apples. She wasn't looking at me. She was just standing there, arms crossed over a basket she hadn't filled yet. Her hair was curled, too perfect. The kind of look you put together when you want someone to see you. I realized then this wasn't an accident. She must have known I came here. Maybe she saw it on our shared loyalty app. I don't know. I wasn't angry, just aware. She spotted me and walked over slowly, like she was giving me time to change direction. I didn't. I stood still. "Hi," she said. "Hey," I replied, calm, neutral. My voice didn't crack. I surprised myself. There was a pause, a full one. No music playing. No noise between us but the hum of the refrigeration unit. Then she said, "You didn't answer." "I know." Another pause. "I shouldn't have sent that," she added, trying to sound casual. But there was something in her throat, tight, like the words cost her something. "Why did you?" I asked. Not because I wanted her back, but because I was genuinely curious. She shrugged, then looked down at her shoes. "I guess I thought, I don't know, that you'd still care." "I do care," I said. "Just not in the way you remember." She nodded slowly, like she had expected a completely different version of me to show up. And I saw it then. This woman I once called my wife didn't know me anymore. Not really. She knew the version of me who always made peace, who always filled the silences, who absorbed every disappointment without asking for anything in return. She had expected him. But that man wasn't here anymore. "You seem different," she said carefully. "I am," I replied. Her eyes narrowed a little. "So you're okay? Just like that?" I smiled, but not with my mouth. Just something soft around my eyes. "No, not just like that. But I'm getting there. And I didn't think I would be." Another silence. This one longer, heavier. "I'm not," she whispered. I looked at her then. Really looked. She looked smaller. Not physically, but spiritually, like something inside her had shrunk and she was trying to stand tall around the empty space. "What do you want from me, Mel?" I asked gently. Not bitter, not defensive, just honest. She didn't answer. Instead, she blinked fast, like she was trying not to cry in public. I watched her struggle with her own expression, her breath catching slightly. And for a moment, I felt a flicker of something. Not love, not pity, but a kind of soft ache for the history we shared. The birthdays, the quiet Sunday mornings, the storms we'd waited out together in the kitchen with blankets and flashlights. You don't just erase that. You learn to carry it differently. "I think I need to talk," she finally said. "Not about the divorce, just everything. I haven't really talked to anyone." And I knew right then what this was. She wasn't coming back because she loved me. She was coming back because she felt lost, because she thought I could still be the safe place, the emotional coat rack where she could hang her guilt. But I wasn't that anymore. I had stepped outside of that role. Quietly, gently, permanently. Maybe, I said. But not today. She looked like she didn't know how to respond to that. I could feel her trying to find the right line to say, something that would crack me open again, pull me into her gravity. But that gravity was gone. I hope you're okay, I told her. Truly. And I turned and walked toward the checkout line. I didn't look back. It arrived 3 days after we saw each other at the grocery store. A plain white envelope, no return address, just my name, Dean, in handwriting I knew too well. I stared at it on the counter for a while before opening it, like it might change the moment I touched it. Didn't. She had never been the letter-writing type. Emails? Yes. Notes on the fridge occasionally. But an actual letter? No. That was new. That felt final. I didn't read it right away. I put it in the drawer where we used to keep napkin rings, of all things. It sat next to the wine opener we hadn't used since her birthday 2 years ago. I wasn't sure if I was avoiding the words or just wanting to delay the weight I knew they carried. Later that evening, I made tea. I don't even like tea, but something about the quiet ritual helped. Boiling the water, pouring it slowly, sitting still while it steeped. No phone, no music, just the sound of the kettle cooling and the letter waiting. When I finally opened it, I didn't read it like I was looking for closure. I read it like I was listening to the voice of a woman I used to know, trying to understand why the person I trusted most had become such a stranger. She started simply, Dean, I know you probably won't believe most of what I'm about to say, and that's okay. I don't think I would believe it either if I were you. There were no pleasantries. No, how are you? Or I hope you're doing well. Just a confession written in loops and slants, ink smudged in places that might have been from her hand. Or maybe tears. Hard to say. She wrote about the weeks leading up to the divorce, about the feeling of waking up beside someone who was good, kind, loyal, and still feeling completely empty. She said she kept looking for something outside of herself to blame. Me, the house, the life we built, the routine of it all. But what she didn't realize until after she left was that the problem wasn't the life. It was the version of herself she brought into it. She wrote, You were never the thing I needed to escape, but I made you carry the weight of everything I hadn't figured out about myself yet. I resented you for being steady when I was unraveling. There was no mention of another man. No apology in that direction, just silence where, in another kind of story, there would have been scandal. I think that's what made it harder. There was no enemy to point to, no secret affair to rage against, just the cold fact that sometimes people leave not because of someone else, but because they don't know how to stay with themselves. She ended the letter with something that stuck to my ribs. I kept waiting for you to fall apart because part of me needed to believe I still mattered that much to someone. But you didn't. And that's what made me realize maybe you were already gone long before I walked away. And maybe she was right. Because the truth is, I had been detaching quietly for years. Not out of spite, not as revenge, but as survival. You can only knock on a closed door for so long before you stop expecting it to open. Somewhere along the way, I started talking less, laughing less, asking for less. And the less I asked, the less she gave. It was a slow, mutual surrender, signed without words. After I finished reading, I folded the letter back along its original creases and placed it in the drawer. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief. I just sat there with the weight of honesty. Hers and mine both finally spoken. That night, I slept with the window open. The air was cold but not uncomfortable. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once and then went silent again. No dreams, just stillness. I wasn't angry with her. Not anymore. But I wasn't going to be her mirror either. The one she stared into, hoping to find herself again. That version of me, the man who used to orbit her emotions like they were gravity. He was gone. And what came next wasn't about rebuilding. It was about remembering who I was before I lost myself in loving someone who didn't love themselves. A week passed after the letter. I didn't write back. I didn't call. I didn't tell anyone about it. That's the thing about something real. It doesn't always demand a response. Sometimes it just needs to exist, to breathe in its own silence. And in truth, I didn't know what I would have said even if I had wanted to reply. There was nothing to fix. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't asking for another chance. She was just offering a memory of who she was when we were together, or who she thought she was. I spent the next few days in a kind of limbo. Not sad, not relieved, just present. I took long walks in the early morning. I started journaling for the first time in my life. And I cleaned. Not in some symbolic, fresh start kind of way, just honestly, methodically. Closets, drawers, corners of the attic I hadn't looked at in years. There's something oddly comforting about wiping down a forgotten shelf, throwing out batteries that haven't worked in a decade. It feels like reclaiming space in your own life. One afternoon, I found her voice again. Not in a dream, not in my head, but in a box of old electronics in the hall closet. A dusty tablet still holding a few old audio recordings from years back. At first, I assumed they were work notes or random grocery lists. But there was one file just labeled Home Draft 1. No date, no context, just that. I nearly deleted it, but something stopped me. I listened. It was her. She was recording herself, probably rehearsing something. Maybe for her therapist, maybe for me, maybe for no one at all. The audio was rough, like she had the mic too close to her mouth. But I could hear her breathing between every few words. Soft, uneven. "I don't think I know how to be married anymore," she said. "I thought I did. I thought we were doing fine. But sometimes I look at Dean and I don't feel anything. Not hate, not love, just space." That word stuck with me. Space. She went on, talking about how she thought life would feel different by now. How she kept thinking marriage was supposed to become something automatic, something stable, not something that needed tending. She admitted that I never did anything wrong and that maybe that was the problem. She said, "He never gave me a reason to leave, but I kept looking for one anyway." Then silence, a long stretch of it. She must have stopped the recording there. It just cut out. I sat on the hallway floor with my back against the wall, holding that old tablet like it was a piece of her I didn't ask for. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I was just still because deep down I knew. I had felt that distance years ago. I just didn't have the words for it then. I used to lie awake next to her, wondering why it felt like I was sleeping beside a memory. Someone I once knew but hadn't spoken to in months. Even though our conversations never stopped, they just stopped meaning anything. I stayed in that spot for a long time, thinking about the space between people. Not just physical distance, but the kind that grows in the pauses between sentences, in the fake smiles at dinner, in the casual, "How was your day?" That doesn't wait for an answer. That kind of space is dangerous. It's quiet, but it hollows everything out. Eventually, I stood up, returned the tablet to the box, and closed the closet door. I didn't take it with me. I didn't save the file. I didn't need to. That voice wasn't hers anymore. It was a version of her that no longer existed, one who was still trying to explain herself to a man who had already stopped asking questions. Later that night, I made dinner. Something simple. Grilled cheese, tomato soup, the kind of meal she always said was a little too plain, even though I loved it. I sat at the kitchen table and didn't reach for a second plate. I didn't light candles or set out napkins. I just ate quietly without apology. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like home. Not because she was gone, but because I was finally back. It was inside a book. One of mine. A novel I'd read maybe 3 years ago and hadn't touched since. I wasn't even looking for anything when I pulled it from the shelf. I just needed something to hold in my hands that wasn't my phone. Something with weight and silence. It was the kind of afternoon where everything felt too loud, even the ticking of the kitchen clock. And I thought maybe rereading something familiar would help ground me. The note fell out from between pages 142 and 143. It was folded once, clean, no wrinkles, as if it had been placed there carefully and never opened since. No envelope, just a small piece of notepad paper with a torn edge. I knew her handwriting immediately, even in those simple first lines. "I don't think I know how to talk to you anymore." That was how it began. No date, no salutation, just a sentence. Then more. "I see you in the mornings and I feel like I should say something, but I don't know what you'd want to hear. You ask if I'm okay and I nod. You don't ask again. And I guess I'm mad at that, even though I'm the one who shuts down first. She went on for a few paragraphs. Stream of thought. Maybe she wrote it one night after I'd gone to sleep. Maybe she meant to give it to me and changed her mind. I'll never know. But as I read it, I realized something that both hurt and comforted me. She had been just as lost inside the marriage as I was. She wrote about feeling invisible, about feeling like I only saw her as a partner, not a person. She said, "You do everything right. You make coffee. You remember appointments. You rub my neck when I forget to ask. But it's like being loved by someone on autopilot. You give everything except your thoughts." And that's where I stopped. Not because it hurt, but because it was true. She had spent so long thinking I didn't feel anything, when the truth was, I felt too much. I just didn't know how to let any of it out without sounding weak, or overly dramatic or selfish. I kept everything buried under competence, under checklists, under gestures that looked like love but were really shields. She thought I had stopped trying, but in reality, I had been trying so hard in all the wrong ways. I sat there holding that note for maybe 20 minutes, just tracing the letters with my eyes. Her words weren't cruel. They were honest in the way people are only when they're speaking into a space they don't expect to be heard in. That paper wasn't meant for me. Not really. It was therapy in ink. And yet there it was, right in my hands. It made me wonder how many moments we shared that looked fine from the outside. Laughter at dinner with friends, Sunday morning errands, little smiles across the couch, while something deeper inside both of us was sinking. I folded the note back up and put it inside the book again. I didn't need to keep it somewhere special. It didn't feel like a keepsake. It felt like proof, not of her failure or mine, but of how easily people can miss each other. Even while living side by side, we hadn't been enemies. We'd been parallel lives, politely waving, never touching. Later that evening, I went out onto the back porch and sat with a blanket. No phone, no music, just the wind moving slowly through the trees and the occasional rustle of leaves brushing against the fence. I thought about all the things we could have said, all the conversations that never happened, and how easy it is to be near someone and still make them feel alone. I'd been scared to be vulnerable, scared to not have the right words, and she had been scared to admit she was drifting. Scared I might not notice, or worse, that I would and do nothing. That night I slept on the couch, not because I was avoiding the bed, but because something about that old leather sofa felt more honest, like it didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. Just a worn-out place where someone could rest. And maybe that's all we'd been in the end. Two people pretending not to be tired. It's been almost 4 months since the day she asked for the divorce. That conversation feels like it happened in someone else's house. Like I watched it play out in a film I used to be part of, but I've since stepped out of frame. I live alone now, not just physically but emotionally, and that's not a sad thing. I've come to realize solitude isn't the same as loneliness. It's not an absence. It's a space. And for the first time in years, I've stopped rushing to fill it. The house is quieter, yes, but the quiet doesn't echo like it used to. It rests. I've picked up small habits again. Things that once felt unimportant but now feel like signs of life returning. I read more. I cook with music playing. I started swimming in the mornings, even if the water's cold. And most importantly, I've stopped walking on eggshells in my own thoughts. I no longer censor what I feel just because someone else might find it uncomfortable. Melody and I spoke one more time a few weeks back. Nothing heavy. She asked if I was open to grabbing coffee just to talk. I said yes, not because I wanted to reopen anything, but because I felt calm enough to look at her and not see a wound, just a chapter. We met at a small place downtown, the kind with old wooden booths and oversteep tea. She was already seated when I arrived. Waved, smiled, but not the kind that said, "I want something," just a smile. And it hit me. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't guarding myself. I was just there with her, the way you sit with someone who once knew the rhythm of your breathing but no longer has a key to your home. We talked for about an hour. She asked how I'd been. I told her the truth. That I've been doing better than I expected. That I was learning to live honestly, not just with others but with myself. She nodded, said she was still figuring herself out, still didn't feel fully grounded. There was no apology, no "let's try again," no desperate reaching across the table. Just two people acknowledging what they once were and what they could never be again, and doing it with grace. Before we left, she said, "I'm glad you're okay," and I believed her. I walked back to my car that day feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because something had been fixed, but because I no longer needed it to be. There was nothing left to prove. No final words to say. We had already lived the ending. Now we were just learning how to begin again, separately. In the evenings, I light the woodsy candle she hated. I leave the window open, even when it's a little too cold. I sit on the porch with a blanket and let the sky get dark slowly. I don't reach for my phone. I don't replay old conversations. I just breathe. And sometimes in that stillness, I think about the version of myself I used to be. The man who waited for permission to feel, who bent in quiet ways to make space for someone who no longer wanted to stay. And I feel a kind of tenderness for him. Not shame, not anger, just understanding. He was doing the best he could with what he knew. But now I know better. Now I live differently, fully on purpose. And if you're reading this, if you've been where I've been, maybe all I can say is this: you don't need a perfect ending. You don't need closure wrapped in a bow. Sometimes peace comes not from answers, but from letting go of the questions. She asked for a divorce. I said yes. And in doing so, I finally said yes to me.